Good morning. What I'm going to be talking about this morning has to do more with educational theory and methodology than it does to do with technology. I'm going to do enough technology, hopefully, to convince you that it's relatively easy and straightforward. But what I'm basically looking to do is have a discussion with you about how to add more concrete examples in the classroom and using a pretty quick and dirty methodology to accomplish that goal. My name's Marjorie McDiarmid. I teach at West Virginia University. Where I use this technology is chiefly in my large class in evidence. I teach about 125 students evidence every fall. And in that kind of major classroom setting, it's very easy to get pretty theoretical pretty fast. And evidence is the kind of topic that frequently lends itself to that kind of exposition. Where the students tend to have difficulty is in applying or thinking about concretely how evidence works in practice. The analogy that I use for people is it's like trying to learn chess without ever having seen the chessboard. My students are typically second-year law students who, if they've had one summer's worth of activity, that activity has largely been within the four corners of their law firms, conference rooms, and libraries. They don't have much real sense about how trials work, how evidence works in trials, and making that leap off of the rules page into the concrete is a difficult task for them to accomplish. The other reason for using this stuff is that it's fun. And I think that, particularly for those of us who have been around for a while, that motivation for the faculty should not be disregarded. Okay, so what we're going to do is look at a problem that I use on the first or second day of evidence class. I use it chiefly not for the content of the substantive rule, but for the role of the judge in terms of controlling the presentation of evidence. But I thought it would be a good one for our purposes because it doesn't require the knowledge of a great deal of the substantive evidence law.
Sustained. This court is now in session.
I call my witness. Where was the fight? Downstairs. Where were you when the fight broke out? Upstairs. Did you later come downstairs? Yes. When you came downstairs, did anyone tell you about the fight? Yes. What did they say? Objection, hearsay.
How should I rule?
So, use your clickers. How should the judge rule? Sustained or overruled? Okay. All right. The vast majority of you believe the objection should be sustained, and you're almost certainly correct. They're asking for substantive content from a witness who's not available to be cross-examined. So let's look a little bit further here. on what basis would you sustain? All right. So I suckered some of you into lack of personal knowledge, but the majority of you who are actually closet whizzes at evidence understand that this is in fact a hearsay problem. That's a distinction, in my view, that doesn't make much difference, but what's interesting in terms of the turning point technology, which is what I'm taking away from this meeting, is that you can group responses based upon the original decision about whether to sustain or overrule. So if you've got people, it's sort of a branching technology. If you've got people who made a mistake on that first question, you can then see whether that mistake carries forward. If you got people who got it right on the first question, then you can figure out whether they got it right for the right reason. So that's a nice little graphic there. Okay, so what we're doing is we're giving people a slice of courtroom practice. It's a very narrow slice. It's a 4 or 5 question examination leading up to the hearsay problem. That's enough, however, to get people into the right mindset. I don't need a complicated 10-minute, 15-minute role play to get us to the point that I want them to focus on. So that's one advantage of using this kind of quick and dirty technology. Another advantage, as we'll see in a couple minutes, is that you can put this together in 15 minutes. Whereas if you're going to develop a role play that's either going to be videotaped outside of class or run in class, it's a much more labor-intensive kind of process. So those are the advantages of using this technology, in my view, over some of the more conventional role play methods. The advantages of using this methodology instead of simply a professor presentation of the hypo is that it's more attention-getting, and it is, in some fundamental way, more concrete. That the students are actually seeing how those questions get asked in a courtroom setting and beginning at least to do one of the things that I'm trying to get them to do with evidence, which is to hear it. Evidence is quintessentially a skill that needs to be practiced to some extent, less than students think, but to some extent on their feet, and therefore needs to involve not only training of their head, but also training of their reaction time and their hearing and their absorption of the material as it comes past them. Other people here who teach big classes, how do you solve this problem from your perspective? Do you try to give people hypos or vignettes? And if you do, what methods do you use to accomplish that? Come on, don't go all law school class on me. Somebody wants to talk. Yes?
I use the very simple method. I teach room report a big class.
Okay.
And there's problems in
Right.
I have playing cards.
Okay.
Red deck, blue deck, they assign 4 each by each student.
Okay.
They can split them up, they can do all one,
Right.
red is prosecutors, blue is defenses.
Right.
Pull a card, you're the defense lawyer, make the motion, you're the prosecutor.
Right.
Explain why not. And I
Okay.
pull another card, you're the trial judge. And I pull another card, you're the appeals court, the people on each side of it. And it sounds like it does not take much time.
Okay. And so you're doing live student presentations in class, okay? What's another method that people are using? Yeah.
Well, my law school evidence teacher had been a Peter undergraduate.
Uh-huh.
And, acted out.
Okay.
Walk over here, play lawyer, walk up there, play judge.
Right.
Walk over there, play opposing.
Okay. All right. So the teacher as the role player. Other. There are some evidence books floating around that have CDs with vignettes that you can play. Nita's got a very old set of vignettes. Production values are god-awful, but they do a nice job of capturing some of the typical trial problems. How about folks who are teaching something other than evidence? You're still using hypotheticals. What do you do to try to make those hypotheticals germane for the students? Just a recitation out of the book? Is that the most common method? Okay. The advantage, as I indicated, I think, of using something like this in evidence is pretty clear. What I wanted to do this morning by way of showing you the technology and also the ease of use is to try to apply it in some other setting where it isn't so obviously germane. And the one that occurred to me, and I'm probably going to live to regret this, but nothing ventured, nothing gained, is contracts. So, unilateral and bilateral contracts. I never understood them in law school, and so they make an ideal material for this presentation. Okay, what we're going to do is set up an interaction between an offerer and a recipient, or whatever the proper term is, in a unilateral contract situation. Right? So first we need the person making the offer. And we're going to get to choose from a variety of characters. This software, by the way, is Vox Proxy. It is put out by a mom and pop operation. When I called for, it's called Right Seat Software in Golden, Colorado. When I called for technical assistance, I spoke to the fellow who, although he didn't say so, is undoubtedly the entire development staff of the, of the operation. It works on the basis of Microsoft Agent technology. They're the people who brought you the paperclip. Don't hold that against them. Okay? All right, so this is the wizard for Vox Proxy. And as you can see, we can do several things with as is frequently the case with these things, the aspect ratio is a little off. But we can choose a character. We can then have that, we can put that character on the screen. We can have that character engage in some action. And we can have that character say something. So the first order of business is to choose the person who's going to, or the thing who's going to make the offer here. Paul is our default character. I always use Paul as my witness because he's the only one they've programmed to sit down. So that's the neutral basis on which I make that choice. But we've got a whole variety of possible witnesses here. I'm not going to run through them all, but let's see. How about Noah? Noah has sort of an interesting... that's Noah, okay? And we'll have Noah come in the middle of the screen. That's what these multiple boxes are here. You can choose an upper, lower, middle entrance point for your character. So that's all we need to do to put Noah in the picture, and we'll insert him. Okay? Now we need a character who's going to be the one who's trying to accept the offer for the unilateral contract. And I rather thought, because he's interesting, and also because of the plenary session yesterday, that Robbie the robot would make a nice choice. Since we were talking about robotics yesterday. Okay, and we'll have him in the lower right-hand corner. Okay. And you can see what's happening with respect to the script here. Each action that I'm choosing in the wizard is introducing a line into the script that tells the character, in this case, what to do. You can also generate those lines once you learn their lingo just by sitting there and typing. So I could, instead of picking it off the list, I could have said, Robbie enters stage right, or words to that effect. Okay, now we need to make Noah say something. So let's choose Noah and the button say something. And we can type anything we want to by way of a dialogue. So all of those pieces that I had the character saying in the evidence script are just me typing dialogue for those characters to speak, and the program reproduces that speech in the voice of the character. I can get some control over voice by this lower set of buttons here. Let me get my handy dandy pointer. Shouldn't wander around. Well, it's a pointless exercise. Normal, monotone, whisper, emphasis, etc. We'll just have regular speech. So, I will pay you $100 if you move around screen. All right, we've gone far enough here to be worth testing. So let's do that.
I will pay you $100 if you move around the screen counterclockwise 1 full revolution.
Okay. Not tough, right? We can all do this. And that's, that's all of the mechanics that are involved in accomplishing that goal. Let's see if I can get these people to behave themselves here. We'll catch up with that in a minute. It's then a relatively easy matter to move the characters around the screen using that move function, and to have dialogue run in conjunction with those moves, so that you end up with a situation where the robot is walking around the perimeter of the screen, and at some point we would presumably have Noah say, I rescind the offer, and then have the class discussion about, is that fair, is that just, is that the way contract law ought to behave, etc. Would that be helpful for folks who are, I know, Scott, you've taught contracts from time to time. Would that be helpful for making concrete this notion? I mean, the typical example is you walk halfway across the Brooklyn Bridge. At what point does the contract kick in? Better, worse, about the same? What do you think?
About the same. I think it's fairly easy to visualize, even just a spoken
on unilateral contracts, you may be right. It may be an easy enough case. What do other folks think about that? Have I chosen too simple an example for our purposes here? Do I have any other contracts teachers in the room? Let me start there. Okay, well, let's think about another choice. Anybody got a suggestion about something that you would like to be able to give your class a relatively pithy example on?
Can you add your own pictures into there? You have to use their characters.
You have to use their characters. The animations are pre-done. Now, they do say that with enough lead time, they'll do an animation for you. And there are, in fact, a fairly wide, they've gotten much better about the range of characters. There are now women who don't look like their cartoon figures, and there are people of races other than Caucasian, and so there are a greater level of choices about people who you might actually want to put in a demonstration.
I was going to put two of my current procedure fellows on the spot.
Uh-huh.
We were talking about show-ups, line-ups, things like that yesterday.
Okay.
Conferring.
All right.
I can see the turning point technology being helpful. I'm not sure how it's animation.
Right. Well, and I mean, the two of them work well together. When I use the animations, I always use them in conjunction with some kind of audience response system. But they really do get at slightly different things. The animation, as I've said a number of times now, in my view, makes concrete situations that are sometimes difficult for students to visualize, or makes more poignant the point that you're trying to make. And that is a different notion from the increment you get through the audience response system.
We both teach criminal procedure.
Right.
I can certainly see areas where the animation can be useful. I think what Deb was referring to was we were trying to find ways in a CALI lesson to bring to life the issues of lineups and the level of similarity that either is or is not required across a variety of suspects. And not having seen all the different characters, I'm not sure whether that would be.
Yeah. This particular setup is not going to capture that for you because there are no characters that are sufficiently similar that you would say, I'm in doubt about whether it's character X or character Y. You're not be inclined in that setting to think about a series of photograph arrays.
Right, and that's what we've
Right.
been talking
Right.
about. From my own experience, I can see the value of the animation connected with Turning Point, although I would probably use Turning Point more often and 11, a few of them with the animation.
Yeah, and that is in fact what I do. But lots of folks are doing the Turning Point technology at this session, so I wanted to do something that had a different twist to it. How about the point at which Miranda warnings need to be given? That's something that frequently confuses criminal defendants, which is the primary context in which I deal with Crim Pro, but is sort of so embedded in the popular consciousness, the wrong answer is so embedded in the popular consciousness that it might be worthwhile trying to shake folks out of that. You were about to say something.
Well, since, one faculty member I was talking to in the course of this, became slowly over the years a convert first to PowerPoint,
Right.
and more recently to Turning Point, and surprised himself in both cases by having done so. But he mentioned how much it's about getting the students to look up.
As opposed to being focused on
on their notes, their laptop,
Right.
or whatever.
Right, okay. So group engagement of any kind. And one of the reasons that I do some break like this in every class is just to refocus the energy. There's a lull that tends to hit, even in a 50-minute class, about 40 minutes in. And there's a virtue in getting them to do something else, anything else, to refocus that energy. So there's that virtue in these kind of interventions quite apart from their content. How about other, yeah?
Well, yeah, I have a question.
Mhm.
Once you've done a script like that,
Right.
can you then cut and paste pieces of that script into another slide to create a new script? I mean,
Yes.
Where you have things where variation of wording matters a lot, which maybe through contracts and
Right.
things like that. I was thinking of insider trading in corporations under the current law, how something is presented in the context in which it comes up, at least in some situations, makes a big difference in terms of whether it's illegal or not. So
Sure.
you can run through different ways of
Right.
the information being given.
Right. Yeah, you can do that. The scripts are just macro scripts. They're just text-based macro scripts. So you can cut and paste, you can change order, you can insert. You've gone down a road, you decide you need to put another piece of material in, just go back to that point and insert it. It's very flexible in terms of, and in fact, you can generate those scripts in any text editor once you know the language. That they provide you with this text editing tool, but it's not required. You can also run the scripts not in PowerPoint. This is set up to make it easy to do it in PowerPoint. But this technology will float over anything that you've got going on the screen.
So any sort of HTML application, such as CALI.
You could, yes. Yeah. If you really want to get heavily into that, Microsoft has on its website a discussion of agent technology and how to make some of those things happen. That does not meet the criteria that I set out at the beginning of this session of being easy. But if you want to use it, it has that capacity. It does not, however, screen capture very well. I had thought that I would do a set of the slides and post it on the wiki, and I can't get Camtasia to pick it up. It's got the sound. You hear the judge going bang, 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 but you don't see any of the figures. Yeah?
Have you investigated machinima using video game engines to create sort of an elaborate 3D world?
Investigate as in read some stuff about it, yes. But again, that doesn't meet my criteria of something I can do in 10 minutes before class starts and have something usable in that setting. The simple technology that we've heard so much about at this conference is really fascinating to me in terms of more long-range simulations, but not for this kind of quick and dirty classroom stuff. Okay. Other questions or thoughts about? Yeah.
Well, the first question that popped into my mind is how much does this cost?
Cheap. Another valuable criteria. They've got 2 sets of pricing, and the high price spread is $200, and the educational is a discount off of that. So and all you need is the one. You don't require additional copies for players or any of that kind of stuff. Yes?
And
Yeah.
you said you could paste text from other places? You could paste any,
Sure.
so I could copy your Alexis, or a paragraph from a piece of paper?
Yeah, if you wanted a character to recite the holding in
Right.
X case, you could certainly have them do
I
it.
want that text.
Yeah, it's just text.
How
Yeah.
does it handle, how well does it handle uncommon words and surnames and things like
Actually, pretty well, and there is a training function so that if you're having a character who needs to be able to articulate a certain word, you can help it do that. Yeah.
You can get a trial version for 30 days. I just downloaded that, and with 10 languages and 16 characters and everything.
Right. Yeah, they'll give you a free download for, as you say, for a 30-day trial period that you can mess around with it. Okay. Yeah.
Have you tried it with Vista or XP or your choices?
They say it is not Vista ready. And I had to get the most recent version to work with PowerPoint 2007. There's some backward compatibility problem or forward compatibility problems with earlier versions, but this one seems to be working pretty well.
Have you tried it?
Don't know. Shows you how xenophobic I am. I think it's just, yeah, they're only saying Windows. Yes.
It strikes me as the kind of thing students would really like to get their hands on as well. Have you ever tried, have you ever given the students to come up with little scenarios or ideas?
No, I haven't. But they do, I mean, the characters are obviously not lifelike, right? Even the ones that are made to look like people that I used in the trial piece are not lifelike. But they have a certain charm, and the students do enjoy the sessions where we use them, including one which is actually some pretty tough material about the distinction between various kinds of impeachment. They're more interested, whether they actually learn more in that session, I think is up for grabs, but they are more interested because of the use of the technology. Yeah.
Can you put a backdrop in for the characters, or does everything take place in a white background? Could you recreate?
You could do a background. It'll run over whatever you've got up on the screen. So you could go into PowerPoint, for example, create a background, and then
you could drop a photograph in
yes,
as a background
yes,
of a railroad station,
and have Paul's graph played out. When I was thinking about the two possible problems that everybody might get into, Paul's graph was the other one that occurred to me as something that you might conceivably want to do. Yes, you could do that. Or in my case, I could take a picture of a courtroom and have these people play out over the... I've not obviously felt that necessary, but it would add just a little bit more verisimilitude to the action. Okay. Other thoughts about possible uses? Yeah.
Can you like play some kind of scenario and have like students stop the action really quickly?
You would have to ask our gentleman from Turning Point that. Can you use the clickers as a stop action device?
It just responds to get based on the question.
Okay, so you have to have a pre-programmed question to.
You can't like raise it if there's like some
No, I do use that technology with my students. There's a set of materials that was originally done out of Harvard and then got re-engineered at Stanford and is now put out by PLI, where there's a trial ongoing and the students, by hitting the computer key, can make it stop and then lodge their objection and have the judge rule on that objection. And I make all my students do that for evidence class, again, because you have to be able to hear evidence. It's not enough to understand the rules. But that's a much more sophisticated technology. Other questions or issues about this? I mean, one thing, the elephant in the room here, obviously, is that sometimes it hangs up. So you want to not probably do it on the fly in front of the class. You probably want to make sure you've got the bugs out before you actually bring it into the classroom. But once you've got the scripts written, I've never had one fail on me. I've had some hang-ups like that while I was writing them, but I've never had one conk out on me after it was written and tested. Yes?
Do you have a set of clickers for the class, or do you make the students buy?
We have, our university is committed to a particular response system, and they've bought them for the whole university. So we just piggyback on. So the students basically check them out at the beginning of the year from the library, and then at the end of the semester they check them back in. Other issues? Yeah. Mom.
Seems to have fun with this now.
Okay, they don't say it does. So. Yeah, well, and I trust your beta testing. So.
Possible application. 5 minutes.
And see it.
All right.
It's easy. So.
Right. Yeah. And aside from the fact that it is apparently a one-person shop, that one person is reasonably responsive. So I don't want to put you off by the fact that this is a small operation. Obviously, the agent technology is Microsoft. Whether that makes you feel all warm and fuzzy or not is an entirely different question. Yes.
You showed how you're doing the animation. What's the process like for incorporating the Turning Point lessons?
Okay. Well, I can show you that because I did that in the last day or so for this session. Go back to the appropriate one. Okay, so here's a Turning Point slide. Basically, what you do is you go into, once you've installed Turning Point, it shows up as an option on your toolbar.
That's in PowerPoint?
That's in PowerPoint, right. And you can insert a slide. You can, once you've inserted it, you can put in your question. just your choices. Over here you can see that I've assigned a correct and an incorrect to the two choices. You can put in, I put in that timing device, that falling ball, it says, 10, 9, 8, and let's see.
So you don't do it within the Vox Proxy?
No, I'm running two entirely different plugins here, which is actually a point in favor of Turning Point. The plugin that the audience response system that I have at my school hates Vox Proxy, and I can't run them simultaneously, so I have to toggle back and forth so that they don't fight with each other. Turning Point has worked seamlessly with, so that's definitely, in my view, a mark in favor of the Turning Point technology. It also has within it and some of that branching capability that we love so much in CALI, which enables you to make the answers to one slide contingent on what they answered on a previous slide. Can be very useful for ferreting out whether people just made the right guess or whether they really understand the material. Also, you can use it to bring additional layers of understanding to the process. But it is also very simple to use in terms of the pick and play off of a menu kind of program. Okay. Other thoughts or questions? Okay, well, I hope that what I regard as the key point here has been at least understood, if not agreed to, which is that there's virtue in being able to make some of your hypotheticals more concrete, more real. That virtue is attached to learning styles. It's attached to just difference as a useful trigger for energy. And there are some things that are just plain better understood with a good example than they are in the abstract, regardless of what your learning style is. So for all of those reasons, I would encourage particularly people who are doing large classroom stuff to think about some kind of use of, whether it's animation, whether it's video, whether it's whatever method, live role play, some kind of methodology of bringing some of these things to life in the classroom setting. Thank you very much.
us, anyone engaged in last year to have much more feedback.
Yeah, and you want to replace them before they actually come out.
The best practice is once a year.
Yeah.